Welcome back to The Bible is Art, and in this video, I want to talk about the two main reasons why I'm a Christian. So oftentimes when people are thinking philosophically or theologically or like about life, they think that, there's two sort of like main things we gotta have an explanation for. And that would be like the origin of the universe and ethics, okay? Just in my common experience. But what I always find is that's like way too atrophied. I'm like, the things that require explanation are like everything. And there's such like a diversity, such like a panoply, a cornucopia of phenomena, of stuff in the world that is different, that requires a sufficient explanation. So what am I talking about? Well, I just jotted down a list on my phone, okay? And like music, sex, babies, math, hiddenness, like the fact that reality is organized into levels, like strata, morality, beauty, narrative, riddles, pain, judgment, guilt, shame, forgiveness, self-sacrifice, consciousness, or even like the things like, hey, why are there like really big things and really tiny things? There's like such a range of phenomena that requires explanation. It's not just these like one or two like large things. And I think there's a problem when you just reduce those two things. Now, the explanation needs to have a certain type of character, okay? It needs to sufficiently explain the phenomena. And what I mean by that is two main things. One is the explanation can't reduce the phenomena, neither can it deny the phenomena. Here's what I mean. So when you're giving an explanation for something, whether it's music or math or something, you can't provide an explanation that just says, therefore, this appears to be this way, but in reality, it's not, right? Now, sometimes that explanation is true for stuff in the world, like the illusion or whatever it is. But I'm like, the whole purpose of thinking and philosophy and life or theology or whatever you want to call it, just like normal human being thinking, is that you are thrown into the givenness of this world and you get all this stuff here and you got to provide an explanation for that stuff. And an explanation is not, actually, it doesn't exist. Actually, this thing isn't meaningful. Actually, right? That's like the opposite of an explanation. It's just denying this thing. And you might say like, okay, well, what if it doesn't exist? Well, it's like, okay, well, maybe, but that should be an explanation that requires like tons of really strong evidence. And it should be of last resort. Why? Because we have all the positive existence of that thing, like the beauty of babies and the transforming power of narrative. And so it's like you have to provide a good explanation that's neither denies it nor it's reductive. Now I talked about denying it, but what is like a reductive explanation? Okay, I used to teach high school, and I used to teach seniors, and I'd teach a worldview class, and one of the assignments I had them do was I said, okay, I want you to take any of these like phenomena, right? Sports or music or anything, consciousness, whatever. And I want you to search in Google evolution and X, that thing, right? So evolution and consciousness or evolution and music. And inevitably, there's an article that's like 40 billion years ago on the plains of the Sahara, if you played a tin whistle, this is going to help you to survive, right? And the whole point of it was to say, listen, today's dominant explanation for phenomena is the evolutionary framework. Now, like evolution as a sort of like basic theory is like fairly banal, right? It's like you have genetic mutation and then you have selection, right? And so like whatever survives, and so you're like, okay, as just talking about like speciation, you're like, okay, whatever, right? But it's taken on a much greater and philosophical role. And this is like don't miss this. This is very strange, right? Because this is the only theory that has sort of like achieved this status. But it's not because of its sort of like explanatory power or sort of like wild evidence or something like that, right? Because you think about like it's not any of Newton's laws that he discovered that it, okay, so you take something like sports or music, right? And today it's like you have sufficiently explained the phenomena of music once you have given it a fitness explanation. That's an evolutionary explanation. Once you have described how it helps us to survive, then it is sufficiently explained, right? Which is crazy, right? It is completely crazy because you think like, okay, does this thing help you to live or survive? Well, yes, obviously it does, right? Any phenomena of note, right? It's gonna be like, yes, that encourages and helps life, but that's hardly an explanation for the phenomena. That explanation is like what the ABCs are to like a great work of poetry. It's like, oh, I know the ABCs, therefore I can write this poetry. It's like, no. It's like, are you denying poetry or ABCs? It's like, no. Yes. Survival is an important feature of phenomena in the world. But once again, it is an insufficient explanation for our experience of the phenomena. Because when we experience stuff, all of those things we listed, we not only sort of like experience it, but our experience has content, right? It has content of like meaningfulness. Or you take like sex and it's like, no, this isn't just for life. It's not less than life, but there's also, like Pope John Paul II said, it is also unitive. Right? That's part of our experience of the phenomena, that this is not only a means of propagating your genes, right, to put it crassly, but also to unite yourself to your wife and the wife to her husband, right? That's part of the experience of the phenomena. And so your explanation for the phenomena needs to be able to account for that. And you can't just say, well, that's a byproduct of no. That's not a great explanation, right? Here's another example. Let's say you're walking through the park and you see a dog and it's a Great Dane. You see, wow, look at that Great Dane. Isn't that amazing? And someone says, actually, that's not a Great Dane. It's actually a hamster. If you provide this type of explanation enough, at some point, when you start stacking that up, and that's the idea of doing this exercise with my students to see the sort of like epistemological place that a sort of philosophical evolution paradigm has taken on. They should be like, oh, this has swallowed up everything, right? And people feel like they can sort of like philosophically rest at the point where there's a fitness explanation. But if you do that enough times and you say, this explains sports and consciousness and cooking and everything else, it's this one very thin explanation. At some point you're like, yeah, I don't know. I mean, that just doesn't seem convincing, right? And if you're constantly denying the surface of things, right? Because everything gets reduced to survival and fitness, and it's like, well, this is not altruism, or this is not this, it's not this, it's not this, it's not this. Well, it just ceases to become a good explanation because you're constantly denying the surface of things. That is to say, the most obvious things. An explanation, most of the time, when you get the motivation, what you see on the surface, it's buttressing the thing on the surface. It's giving you a fuller love and experience and explanation of the thing on the surface. And so you say, oh my goodness, that makes so much sense of the surface of things, and doesn't give you this sort of like Gnostic idea of, okay, now I know the secret reason for all of these things, or why they exist. No. So that's the first reason I'm a Christian. It's because of its explanatory power, because I find the explanation of God, creation, fall, redemption, the triune God, conscious, all of these things provides better explanatory power for this whole range of phenomena. Now, the second main reason has to do with the difference between shallowness and depth. Here's what I mean. Our experience of the world is one of depth. That is, that the world feels like a deep, meaningful, magical place, right? Of course, not always, but there's all this stuff and experiences is in the world, and you go to the ocean and you fall in love and you have all of these experiences. They feel deep. They feel layered. They feel infused with meaning and layers of meaning and significance. And this is one difference between the ancients and the moderns, because the ancients had this intuition about the world, and this is true of Plato and Aristotle and Pythagoras, right? And of course, the Bible, right? But the moderns, many moderns, are very reductive, right? So they reduce the whole range of phenomenon to a sort of very flat explanation. I think the natural experience of the world is to say, no, this thing is this monstrous beauty with depth and meaning suffused throughout the whole, right? And that biblical explanation makes sense of our intuition and our experience of the world, that the world is in fact deep, right? And whenever we experience these things of depth, the modern man will say, well, no, that's just, they will deny or they will reduce it, right? Because, well, you have this experience because actually it helps you to survive, or it helps our ancestors survive, and da-da-da-da. And he's like, well, I'm sorry, but my experience of the world far exceeds that thin explanation. I often think that when people are thinking through philosophies and worldviews, you have a lot of sort of like common places that you always, like ethics and economics and how does this view society and all these things. And I think that another thing that you need to consider amongst worldviews is the difference between surface and depth. How do they think about the difference between surface and depth? And this is a theologian has coined this wonderful phrase, is that the thing about the Christian faith is that it saves the surfaces, right? So all of these experiences, it has a good explanation and it's not reducing those. And I think that's wonderful and it's true. But I think that there's one other thing, because there's always going to be, everyone always will believe in a surface and a depth. That's part of reality. It's part of that, it's connected to the fact that we have interiors and exteriors. We have public and private, right? It's a deep philosophical and theological thing. But there will always be, everyone will always believe in a surface and depth, and there will always be a clash between worldviews and surface and depth. And I'll give you an example. So, even say like this sort of staunch philosophical evolutionist will be arguing the depths because, well, you actually believe X, Y, and Z because of, and then they'll give the deep explanation, right? This phenomena is what's actually going on is this. And so on one level, it is true that the modern man sees things as very flat. But on another level, it's like they do have a depth. The depth is just very thin. So let me close with one text. Paul in Ephesians 5 quotes from Genesis 2 saying, "A man shall leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife, the two shall become one flesh." And this is what Paul says. This is amazing. He says, this is a mystery, that is the marriage of a man and a woman. This is a mystery, and I'm telling you that it refers to Christ and the church. Now, what's fascinating about this? Well, what's a mystery, right? Well, a mystery is something that is hidden, right? It's in secret. It's something that has to be found out or disclosed. And he's saying, this thing with Adam and Eve, and that propagated throughout every generation, there was something hidden inside here. And so what he's saying is you have this thing on the surface, you have this marriage, and it contains within itself another level of meaning. We can call this symbolism, right? Or an image, right? But the idea is that you have two layers of phenomena. You have a depth, you have a surface, and you have a depth, and these things are connected, right? And so he's saying within the world, within creation, there's this thing that was hidden, that it was secret. And you had this universal reality of love and marriage, and it's saying contained within there is a secret, a mystery. And Paul is saying, and it's actually communicating the thing that's at the heart of reality, God's relationship, Christ and his church, right? And so, and if we take one more step and say, okay, so is that the only thing in the world that contain depths? I don't think so. I think that there are many things that contain depths. And the wonderful thing about the Christian faith is that world is opened up for us there. Thank you everyone for checking out the video. I really do appreciate it. Feel free to leave your comments or questions below. I do try to read all of them. If you would like to support the channel, you can do so patreon.com/thebiblesart. You can go to my website, thebiblesart.com/newsletter, if you would like to be notified whenever a new video comes out. And I will